Okay, today we are beginning the Vietnam War. In order to understand the Vietnam War, you do have to look at some of its background history first. Vietnam started out as a colony of the French. It was called French Indochina, which included the the modern countries today of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And so as a French colony, the Vietnamese were not very happy being a colony, and so they're going to resist the French rule. They will resist the French rule with revolts and strikes all the way up through the 1930s. In 1930, a new party will be introduced into Vietnam. It's the Communist Party. The leader is going to be a man named Ho Chi Minh, and he will be exiled. He goes to first to the Soviet Union and then to China to learn more about communism and how it works and all that fun stuff. But he is kicked out of the country. The French kick him out because they think he's a danger. In 1941, World War II breaks out, and Japan controls Vietnam because France is out of the picture by 1940, conquered by Germany. And so Japan, in its expansion, is going to take over Vietnam. And it's at that point that Ho Chi Minh returns to Vietnam, and he will organize with other groups, and he eventually forms the Viet Minh. And the Viet Minh is a rebel group. It's a communist rebel group that wants independence for Vietnam. At the end of the war, in 1945, Japan is out of the picture, but not France. Now France is free, and it wants its colony back. And so in 1945, Ho Chi Minh is going to declare Vietnam independent. And the French reaction is to go to war. They want to keep their colony because it's a way for them to get some nice income. Well, between 1950 and up until 1954, the U.S. had been providing substantial aid to the French to help them keep Vietnam. But the French are steadily losing this war. They had been taking a beating in World War II, and now they're getting their butts kicked in Vietnam. And eventually what's going to happen is that you see a division in Vietnam in the north and the south. The north is going to be very pro-communist, and the south is very pro-French to some extent. In 1944, we'll see a major defeat of the French at a fort named Dien Bien Phu. The French are under siege at this fort, and they're under siege for a month, and they're starving, and they're sick, and they're wounded, and they're tired, and they finally surrender. And so President Eisenhower of the U.S. is going to be put under a lot of pressure about Vietnam to not let Asia fall to communism, because here China had already fallen, and we're worried about the Soviet Union and its influence in places, and North Korea we didn't do so well with. And so he's put under a lot of pressure not to let Vietnam fall either. And so he was suggested, or it was suggested to him, there we go, a little bit better way of saying it. It was suggested to him by his Joint Chiefs of Staff that maybe we should do this thing called Operation Vulture. And Operation Vulture was supposed to be this air raid by the U.S. over Vietnam, and we would use nuclear weapons to get rid of the communists. Luckily, this is going to be vetoed by Eisenhower. He's going to say, no, Vietnam's really not that important. We don't need to do this. And so the Geneva Accords will take place. It's a peace treaty agreement giving Vietnam its independence. It does temporarily divide the country into two along the 17th parallel. Remember, Korea was the 38th parallel. Vietnam is the 17th parallel. And so they temporarily divide it in two. And they say that, well, in 1956, we'll have an election to decide what government's going to rule over the united country, of pulling it all together. So the North is communist, the South is non-communist. The North is going to be led by Ho Chi Minh, right, the original communist of Vietnam. And the South is going to be led by Ngo Dinh Diem, and Ngo Dinh Diem was supported by the United States. We kind of hand-selected him. We wanted him to be in charge. We wanted somebody who was our voice to be there. Well, the U.S. eventually is going to step in because the elections of 1956 roll around, but we don't want these elections to take place. So the election never happens. The U.S. is very scared that it's going to lose control of South Vietnam to the communists, because nobody likes Diem. Nobody likes Ngo Dinh Diem. Ho Chi Minh probably could have easily won this election. Diem is not very popular at all. Well, why isn't Diem very popular? Well, no Diem, once he's in power, becomes very, very corrupt. He doesn't help out the peasants. In addition, he's a Catholic in a Buddhist country, so that doesn't help either. And so he begins to restrict some of the religious practices, and that just isn't going to fly very well at all. Well, the communists begin to influence South Vietnam. A communist opposition group, the Viet Cong, is going to be created, and it's in opposition to the South Vietnamese. It's going to come in to try and get rid of government and government officials in the South. So this Viet Cong are communist people who are infiltrating the South and trying to take over the government. The NLF, the National Liberation Front, is the military of North Vietnam, and it's going to be supported by Ho Chi Minh. In fact, it's going to send supplies along a trail network called the Ho Chi Minh Trail that is going to keep them very well supplied so that they can continue attacks in South Vietnam. Well, eventually Kennedy becomes president in the 1960 election, and he's going to look at the situation in Vietnam, and he's going to realize, we better be doing something here. And so he's going to deepen the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Well, JFK's view of foreign policy has a lot to do with why we were there and why we got more involved. First off, he felt that communism was led by the Soviet Union and China, which, fine, they can be communist, but they can't spread their influence anywhere. Number two, he felt that the communist rhetoric was coming true. Communism says that it's eventually going to spread throughout the world. Well, look at what it's been doing. It's been spreading. It's in Cuba. It's in North Korea. It's trying to get into Vietnam. It is spreading. The third is that the U.S. has been making a lot of poor choices. We have suffered a lot of reversals, and so we need to take a strong stand somewhere. Why not Vietnam? We have a good chance of winning it, kind of thing. It seems like we have a good chance of winning it. The fourth is that Southeast Asia, for JFK, he sees this as a lab for U.S. experimentation. This is where he can use his flexible response and counterinsurgency and basically just see how this all pans out, see how it works. And so Vietnam is going to be a small test in our larger world of threats. He sends in 16,000 military advisors to Vietnam. They are not to partake in military actions. Instead, their goal is to train the South Vietnamese army. Train them so that they can fight their own war. So 16,000 military advisors are sent in. In addition, the military is going to use what's called the Strategic Hamlet Program. And the reason this is endorsed, or the reason this is used, is because in Vietnam, it's very difficult to tell who the enemy is. Because it's not like they're a whole different race or anything. The South Vietnamese look very similar to the North Vietnamese. They're not different in color. They're not different in facial structure. They're not going to wear different clothes to plainly point out who they are. And so this idea thought up by the military, the Strategic Hamlet Program, is that, well, we'll move all the villagers in an area, in a zone, into one village, so that way it's a protected area, and anybody who doesn't want to stay in this area is somebody who wants to, if somebody wants to leave and they're very, very adamant about that, then maybe we should be questioning why they want to leave. And the idea behind this is to know who's Viet Cong, who's VC, and who's not. And so that's the whole purpose behind this, is that if people are trying to get in and they're a little too anxious to get in, or if they're a little too anxious to get out of these hamlets, then we should be very curious about why that is. In addition, about 1960, Diem is going to increase his Buddhist persecution, and he becomes even more corrupt. Well, the U.S. is going to let it be known that, hey, we're not going to stand in your way. If you want to get Diem out, you can overthrow him. And so there's like some rumors that are leaked to the South Vietnamese army that, hey, you can get rid of him. It's okay. We won't stand in your way. So in November of 1963, there is a military coup, and Diem is assassinated. Well, that's not what we meant. We meant overthrow him, kick him out of the country. We didn't really specify that, unfortunately, and he is assassinated, his entire family is assassinated, and that was an oops. That was not supposed to happen. Well, 3 weeks later, JFK is also assassinated, and so both countries are now without leadership. And so we will see how Lyndon Johnson will pick up the leadership of Vietnam after JFK's assassination.